Right now, we're kind of rounding out our opening weekend for Captain America 4 or Captain America Brave New World. And in some respects, things are looking good for it, but in others, not so much. We have this article right here from MovieWeb talking about the audience reception to it, because even though this movie seemed to bring in quite a bit of money during its opening weekend, or at least at first glance, it looks like it's bringing in quite a bit of money, like worldwide, just under $200 million, $192 million. Domestically, it's around 100 million, it says. Of course, this isn't necessarily precise. That's why you get a nice round number like $100 million. It's still just kind of figuring it out. It even has it right here on Box Office Mojo, how much it's making tomorrow. So you can see that this isn't necessarily exact at this point. The exact estimates will probably be a little bit lower than that because that's what the projections were saying. So I'm assuming it'll probably be along the lines of what the projections were, although it be at the high end of it. But still, this right here could be looked at as a good sign for this movie, especially if you're one of the people who actually believe what Disney says about how their budget's only $180 million. Even though there's a lot of people who actually came out recently, people working on the movie said like, no, there was entire sequences that were shot and scrapped. There was a lot of stuff that was reshot. The director has said like the reshoots weren't that extensive. Disney's saying they're not that extensive, but they have a motivation to try to say that things were a lot better than what it actually was, because otherwise they have to admit that they spent a lot more on this movie than what they initially planned, and how much they're making right now isn't that good. But even if the budget was just $180 million and they didn't go over budget, and that's how much they actually spent on this movie, this opening weekend may not actually be the saving grace that some people think it is, because with the budget like $180 million, when you factor in marketing and all the other costs to it and the theaters getting their cut, then this is something that probably needs to make around $500 million at the global box office in order to just break even. And I'm not saying it's doubtful that they're actually going to hit that mark, because it's really possible that they could hit that with this opening, but it's not a guarantee, especially with the reaction to it. Jumping back to this article from MovieWeb, Captain America Brave New World gets more bad news with unwanted record. Marvel fans had high expectations for Captain America Brave New World. I don't really know if they had high expectations. I think it was just kind of mediocre. Imagine a triumphant new chapter in the franchise following last summer's Deadpool and Wolverine that would anchor Anthony Mackie as the shield-wielding hero for the next several years. However, the release of the movie's cinema score as Hulk smashed the Avenger, first solo movie as the leader of Earth's mightiest heroes. The Captain America mantle has boasted an impressive history of positive audience ratings. The first Avenger achieved A- from Cinema Score, while the Winter Soldier and Civil War maintained a similarly high mark. Now, Brave New World has not only proved to be the lowest rated Captain America movie, but has achieved the lowest score of the entire MCU with a disappointing B- result. Now, I'm not saying a B- on Cinema Score is actually a bad thing. It's just kind of mediocre, but it is true that it is quite a bit lower than what the other ones have actually had, which just goes to show audiences obviously don't like this as much as some of those other movies out there. Though early box office numbers are reasonably strong, with the movie looking at the highest opening of the year so far. Now, that's not really saying a whole lot because we're only in middle February. I believe there's only like 7 weeks in the year at this point right now. So saying it's the highest in the year so far is not really a huge bar, especially when you consider January, February is usually like the dumping ground for movies, where there's really no big budget movies or no movies that are really expected to make a high amount of money at the box office being released at this time of year. In fact, it's actually kind of strange for having this movie released as early as it does right now, but I guess Disney was just kind of banking on the fact that there's really not a whole lot of competition. And I'm not using that as like an excuse or anything like that, but just I think it's fair to point out that this movie is raking in a lot of money right now because there's really nothing else to watch if you wanted to go watch something in theaters. Critical reviews of the film were completely split on whether Brave New World is just the same old story of a Marvel movie that doesn't deliver anything different to what came before it. On Rotten Tomatoes, though, audiences seem to be much happier with the film. scoring at a positive 80% on the popcorn meter. It seems, though, that those giving this their opinions on CinemaScore, which assess how audiences on opening night feel as they leave the screening, have been a little let down on what they saw. And I think a lot of that could be laid at the feet of Hulk right here. A lot of the promotional material for this movie was showcasing Giancarlo Esposito heavily in it, featuring Red Hulk in it a lot. And those two really weren't in it that much. They were just kind of featured prominently in the marketing in the lead up to it because, well, those are big names attached to this, or big things like having another Hulk in this. They're going to lean heavily on that in the promotion, even if his actual involvement in the movie is pretty minor right there. But jumping back over to Rotten Tomatoes, you can see 80% for audiences, which isn't anything to scoff at. I mean, that's, I think, a respectable score, but for something like this, for a Marvel movie, that's not really high. I talked about this in a video earlier this week when I saw the critic score was not really good, because I was saying there's oftentimes you'll see the disagreement between critics and audiences, and ultimately what matters is whether or not audiences like the movie, because if audiences like it, well, then it can make a lot of money. There's plenty of movies out there, even ones that have gone on to make over $1 billion at the global box office, that had terrible scores for critics, but audiences loved it. And as a result, people kept coming back and watching the movie. But that's not the case when it comes, or at least that doesn't seem like the case when it comes to this movie, because even though 80% is okay, it's nothing really spectacular. It's just kind of mediocre for a Marvel movie. And that's also reflected when you see Metacritic right here. It's a little bit more along the same lines, where you have 42 for critics, 4.5 for audiences. So they're more in agreement with it on that. Actually, I'm going to jump back over to Rotten Tomatoes just to see. Okay, that's the verified audiences at 80. Okay, a little bit lower for critics. So all critics is 51%. Top critics, it's 39. All audiences are 76. Verified is 80. So that just kind of gives you an idea. Most people, either they don't really care for this movie, or they just think of it as kind of, mediocre at best. In general, or maybe that at worst, mediocre or something. Actually, no, I'd say at worst, it's probably people don't like it, but general consensus is it's just kind of an okay movie, nothing too great, but nothing bad either. Unfortunately for them, though, they need to have more than just a okay reception, especially with how much they made during this opening weekend and how much they actually need to make at the global box office in order to break even. In general, cinema scores reflect the critics' score on Rotten Tomatoes seem to have less and less influence on whether someone goes to see the movie or not. That's true. Word of mouth is king. Opinions are just that, and many times what one person loves, another, well, hey, making it almost impossible to judge a movie based on what another person thinks of it. However, cinema score for Captain America Brave New World can only be seen as disappointing, as the B- rating puts the movie below other planned and financially disappointing movies such as Eternals, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumanium, and The Marvels. It also means it shares the same kind of result as Sony's dismal run of Spider-Man villain movies like Venom, The Last Dance, and the catastrophic Fox X-Men movie Dark Phoenix. Yeah, that is a bad sign when you're performing less than other ones right there. But let's just take Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumanium, because that's something that I was already looking into when it comes to this video right here. Because Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumanium, for people who don't know, actually had a pretty good box office opening. You can see right here, $100 million opening. Jumping back to Captain America Brave New World, they're saying around $100 million domestically during this opening weekend. I believe it all, so February 17th to when it opened up. So around the same time of year it opened up as Captain America Brave New World. They both have a similar box office domestically during their opening weekends, but look at what they made at the global box office when it was all said and done, $476 million. And this is something, I believe they spent more on it than what they're saying that they spent for Captain America Brave New World. But still, if Captain America only makes $476 million, then that's a bad sign for it. Now, granted, this one actually broke a record during its second weekend. You can see it had this huge drop off, 82% Friday to Friday, 56% Saturday to Saturday, 65% drop Sunday to Sunday. So, and I think this actually at the time, I don't know if it still holds the record, but it had the biggest second weekend drop for a Marvel movie that came out. And now I'm not going to say that Captain America Brave New World is going to beat the record and have the biggest second weekend box office drop. But one of the things I did say about this movie in regards to the opening weekend is this opening weekend for the reported budget that they had for this one is not bad, assuming that it is $180 million budget, but that's not going to be enough to propel this into success. What they really need is good word of mouth. I said about that in the past. And even though the critic scores didn't look too good, I said the audiences are going to determine whether or not word of mouth for this movie is going to be enough to carry it. And so far, it's not looking like that's going to be the case. It looks like people aren't going to be excited to go out and see this movie if they were kind of on the fence about it. They want to hear like, this movie's great. We loved it. You need to check it out yourself. They don't want to hear, it's okay, you could see it if you want. At that rate, people are just gonna be like, well, I'll just wait for it to come out on streaming or something like that. Then maybe I'll watch it then. And I'm curious what the second weekend for this movie is going to be. If it's going to have a decent enough box office hold, which is if it can have less than a 55% drop off at the box office during its second weekend, then that's an okay hold right there. But if it's a greater than 55% box office drop during the second weekend, well, then that suggests that this movie is in trouble. And that is a strong possibility because a lot of Marvel movies are front loaded. The people who go to watch it are the people who are excited to see Marvel movies, the existing Marvel fans who would just unquestionably go out and watch anything Marvel related opening weekend the first time it comes out. You're going to get the big numbers during the opening weekends. And we've seen that time and time again. It's the second and third weekends is when you get the regular audiences, the people who aren't necessarily already sold on it. They have to be convinced to go see it. And right now with the reaction to it, I'm not sure that that's actually going to happen, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe people are thinking B- cinema score and 80% of Rotten Tomatoes is good enough for them to actually justify shelling out their money. And like I said, especially since there's not a whole lot of competition in theaters, maybe this could actually pull through and have some legs underneath it. But right now, it's too early to tell whether or not this movie is going to be successful. But if I was to have to make a bet right now, I would probably not be willing to bet on this movie being a financial success for Marvel and Disney, and assuming they actually didn't go over budget for it. But let me know what you think about this in the comment section below. Have you seen this movie? If you haven't, are the reception to it enough to actually get you to want to see it, or are you willing to just pass it up right now? And also, if you haven't already, make sure you click that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date with the latest in entertainment news. And don't forget to click that like button and share this video out there because it really helps out with the channel. Thank you.